Hi, I'm Faith McInerney, and today we're going to be talking about Juno Chiron in aspect. We're going to just a word about aspects and formats. You're going to see traditional and non-traditional aspects and formats in this presentation. The next two slides are going to explain the non-traditional techniques, but you're going to understand everything just as well, whether you know the non-traditional or don't know the non-traditional. The delineations will be identical without knowing anything about these techniques. But we are going to get technical for 1 minute. Even though this is a video about delineation, understanding aspects is a two-part process. You've got to understand the meaning of it, but you also need to be able to identify the aspect when it occurs. You need to see it and then delineate it. So there's many ways to see occurrences of aspects, traditional and non-traditional. To maximize the likelihood of seeing aspects, I use both. Now, they're not essential to your understanding the meaning of Juno Chiron, but so you'll know just as much about it with or without the techniques. And here are the two slides. Here's Donald Trump's chart. He's got a Juno Chiron conjunction, and we see it very clearly on the wheel. But here it is on a dial. This is one aspect, three formats: the wheel, the dial, and the sword. So we know the wheel. Here's the dial. We see his Juno Chiron conjunction, looks like a conjunction, but we also see that the sun and the ascendant are in aspect to Juno Chiron, looking like a conjunction. This is why I prefer the 22.5 sword. Everything that's in aspect lines up like it's a conjunction. It's expressed sun equals ascendant equals Chiron equals Juno. Now, a sort is exactly what we've been looking at, but in linear order. And the value is you can see the orbs. So you can see that he's got a 6-minute orb. Well, we could see that anyway, because that's a real conjunction. That's easy to see. But the distance between his Juno and his sun is 37 minutes. All of this happens in 37 minutes. Let's talk for a minute about midpoints, which are just like aspects. It blends the meanings of the planet. Now, people say they're complicated, and they are when you look at too many of them. Today, we're going to be looking at the sun at the midpoint of Chiron and Juno, not all the 4 asteroids, just Chiron and Juno. This is what it looks like. If the sun was at the midpoint of Chiron and Juno, it would show up this way on a sword, but it shows us the orb, 5 minutes orb. The other aspect we're going to look at, the other point we're going to look at, is the Aries point at a midpoint. Planets and midpoints that aspect the Aries point are identical in influence, in importance, as planets, as midpoints that include the sun. So when Aries is at the Chiron-Juno midpoint, this is the way it's expressed. Aries equals Chiron-Juno, and we give it the 3-minute orb. You'll see the numbers all line up, whether we're looking at a dial or a sort, all the numbers line up. So it's complicated and easy at the same time. And what's the most important part is the delineations are identical. Now, a word about delineations. We are going to be focused on event-oriented astrology. And I use progressions and transits that correspond with the event whenever possible, because in all candor, these delineations came out of my head. So I need to objectify what I've done here with progressions and transits. It's always important to remember, especially when looking at my work, that circumstances can be symbolized in more than one way, that every aspect has more than one meaning, that these illustrations are in sync with my understanding so far of the components of the aspect, and that the findings are limited to my observations. They are not the last word. Spend a minute talking about Chiron. He was the only refined centaur. I start with this because I've grappled with Chiron, the way Chiron distinguished himself. So he even distinguished himself by being more refined than the others. Very important. We're going to actually come upon that later, where we see the handsomest guy or the sexiest guy has a Chiron quality because he set himself apart. So Chiron's birth was the result of a rape. His father disappeared before he was born. His mother left him after he was born. So he lacked any kind of connectedness. The other important attribute of Chiron is that he was wounded in an accident, and as a result, he suffered pain nonstop. And he was immortal, but he chose to die to escape the pain. So when we delineate Chiron, it's important to remember that healing does not occur without a wound. And the two most important characteristics of Chiron that I can determine are the wound and the separativeness, even if he's separated because he's sort of better or more refined than the others. So the way it manifests, but he was a wounded guy physically, the way it manifests is in a physical or mental pathology, damage or harm to a living or non-living entity. The Chiron can represent the victim of the harm or the inflictor of the damage or harm. If we're talking about the repairing, the healing, when we're talking about a non-living entity, we're talking about repairing it rather than healing emotion or healing physical tissue. It's also important to remember that Chiron is any distinction from others. Positive, negative, they are distinct from others, they're outsiders. And all of these attributes can be symbolized in other ways. Now, Chiron has other qualities, skill, teacher, musician, hunter, but these are less apparent in the transits and the progressions. Let's spend a minute talking about Juno. These are quotes from Demetra George about Juno and relationship. A Juno relationship exists within the context of separation and return. That's a Juno relationship. The personal interactions that I've studied that are represented by Juno do not always constitute a committed relationship as we know the term. You know, commitment is very common word used with Juno, not exactly as most of us understand the words, and we'll see some of that. Juno relationships have something in common with Venus-Uranus and with Venus-Saturn. The other important thing to remember about Juno is that Juno corresponds with beauty and enhancing the environment. This is a quote from Demetra George. It governs women's and men's beauty and adornment, and it extends into the home. But it's not only women and men's adornment, it is the appearance of anything. When we talk about enhancement of the environment and extends into the home, yes, a doorknob, a lamp, these are all Juno entities. So Juno corresponds with the appearance of anything, including but not limited to beauty and adornment of the home. So here are some relationships. These are events that occurred to relationships when they had, I think these are all progressions. Oh no, we have one transit here. When these people had transits or progressions of Juno and Chiron, this is what happened. L. Ron Hubbard, the Scientology guy, he was married. His wife took the rap, took the blame so that he could avoid arrest. He left and they never saw each other again. That happened when his natal Juno Chiron, which we see here, is a declination. When that declination became exact by progression, he left and they never saw each other again. That was a Juno-Chiron relationship event. When Henry VIII beheaded Anne Boleyn, transiting Chiron, was squaring his natal Juno. This is why I prefer those dials, is you can really see what's going on. But if you look at the outer wheel, your eyes are better than mine. Here we go. Transiting Chiron was hitting his natal. No, I can't see that. I can't see that what it was hitting. This is too tiny. I've got to come back with all dials. But at any rate, I've looked at this in its larger version, and transiting Chiron was squaring his natal Juno when he beheaded his wife. Van Gogh's marriage proposal was rejected when transiting Chiron was stationing conjunct his natal Juno. So we're talking about Juno Chiron, and the natal aspect appears in the natal charts of Prince Charles, Princess Di, and Camilla. When Diana connected with Charles and married him, she had progressed Juno Chiron, probably 5 or 6 minutes orb. When Camilla met her first husband, her progressed Chiron equaled natal Juno, maybe about 5 minutes orb, and it's in Charles's natal chart. So whether it was in the present or the future, there was or would be a partners. So here we have Elizabeth I of England. And if we can jump right to the dial here, we can see that she's got a Chiron-Juno square, Chiron at 8 and Juno at 9. And we see that it was in also an aspect to Pluto and the nodes. We would not see Pluto in the nodes on the traditional chart. We see it on the dial, and we see it on the sword. It's red Pluto equals node equals Chiron equals Juno with a 2-degree orb. So this is what happened each and every time that symbolism was triggered off by, in this case, we're just going to be doing transits. When Jupiter triggered it, her mother was beheaded by her father. That was when her father was King Henry VIII, beheaded Anne Boleyn. He had Chiron to Juno. She had transiting Jupiter triggering her Chiron Juno. She had one very important boyfriend, Robert Dudley, and I don't know if we're going to be talking about him anymore today. But at any rate, when transiting Pluto triggered her Juno Chiron symbolism, he was involved in beheading her cousin Mary. When transiting Chiron triggered the symbolism, she rejected marriage. She actually paid him to leave. When transiting Pluto triggered the symbolism, one of her suitors died. When transiting Pluto again triggered the symbolism, her boyfriend financed a foreign war. She was duplicitous with him. It put him in debt for the rest of his life. That was transiting Pluto and transiting Chiron triggering her symbolism. And when transiting Neptune hit the whole thing, Dudley died. He was the closest to being the love of her life. Not only was Neptune triggering this, but transiting Chiron was also trining natal Juno. This is very important about the concept of trines versus squares. My opinion is that really it's not so much the nature of the aspect, but the nature of the planets. That when you have Saturn trines, they will operate like Saturn. And when you have trines of Chiron, it will operate like Chiron. And we're going to see a couple of more trines in a few minutes. But that's a good one, that Chiron was trying her Juno when her most favorite boyfriend died. Now here is a successful, happy love story with Juno Chiron. This is Edward IV had a happy marriage. In fact, this was the Tudors, the War of the Roses. They united England. They were, magical couple, really. He had natal Juno Chiron, and when they married, transiting Chiron was squaring natal Juno. So they were very happily married, but they married in secret. They had a class difference that embarrassed his mother, and she threatened to disown him. He had 5, this is a happy marriage, he had 5 illegitimate kids outside of his marriage. 3 of them, nobody knows who their mothers were. his legal marriage was judged invalid, and his legitimate children were declared illegitimate. And so you get the idea. Even a positive Juno Chiron situation can have wrinkles. So I did some research on the Me Too movement over the past couple of years and found Juno Chiron. So when Harvey Weinstein was available, first of all, let's look at Harvey Weinstein's chart for a second. I mean, we really wouldn't have to go past this Mars on the ascendant in Scorpio. It kind of says the whole thing right there. But at any rate, he does have more than that. He has natal, moon. He's got natal moon, Saturn, Juno, Chiron, and Ceres. And here he is on the dial. When he was arrested, it was triggered by a conjunction of Venus and Mars in the sky. Transiting Sun was conjunct to Saturn. It didn't exist in a vacuum. In fact, he had progressed Venus to Uranus also. When you're using the sort and you're using it for progressions, the progression will show up as B, and the natal will not, just an asterisk. So we see that his progressed Venus was 0 degrees from natal Uranus, with Venus Mars hitting his Juno Chiron. And when Jeffrey Epstein, who had no Juno Chiron, no natal Juno Chiron, but when he was arrested, transiting Chiron triggered natal Juno. He's also got Venus Mars. We're going to be doing a Sex in the Horoscope series, and we'll see more about Venus Mars, but he's a Venus Mars guy too. So here are some other Me Too illustrations. When the whole thing sort of, after Weinstein was arrested, there was a Golden Globes event, and the whole thing was just Oprah got up and talked, and it was a big deal. And there was a Juno Chiron picture in the sky that night of the Golden Globes. Here are some other people that was hitting Oprah's sun, by the way. She's 9 Aquarius, so this whole thing triggered Oprah's sun. So here are some other guys who got, who had issues with the Me Too movement, and they all had Juno Chiron. Louis C.K., Les Moonves, Charlie Rose, Casey Affleck, Donald Trump in his way. Now, Melania and Stormy Daniels do not have natal Juno Chiron pictures, but they had Juno Chiron transits when the whole Stormy Daniels thing blew up. And of course, we know that Trump has the natal aspect. So we see it with victims as victims and perps, both ways. Jackie O has the symbolism, Hillary Clinton has the symbolism, Bill Clinton has the symbolism. It was triggered when Lewinsky came out and talked about the dress, and he admitted the affair, and he had a solar arc of Juno and Chiron. Now, I'd like you to look at this sort for a minute, because here is the value of the sort. In this case, the B is the solar arc. He's a Sun-Venus natal. And by solar arc, the sun was within 3 minutes of Chiron Juno. And there you see probably, I mean, there's a few benefits of the sort, but from the standpoint of progressions and solar arcs and orbs, there you see it. J.C. Duggard, who was an abducted person, she had 2 children in captivity, and she had the declination. So there we go. Now, I also saw Juno Chiron in the horoscopes of some weird sex offenders, like necrophiliacs, vampires, people who like to make love to dead people. And here's a guy with just sort of general sex crimes, Marquis de Sade. And so in general, we can say that One of the pictures for spousal abuse and sex crimes is Juno Chiron, but there are others. Unfortunately, we can kind of run out of, fingers and hands and toes in listing all of the symbolism for spousal abuse, but Juno Chiron is one of them. Now, the other level of Juno is appearance. And when Juno corresponds with the appearance, it's physical appearance that's distinctive or sets one apart. Health may have an impact on your appearance. Items worn when you're disabled or injured are Juno Chiron. Damaged clothing or damaged decorative items are Juno Chiron. On the positive side, the healing, the repair, the preservation, the recycling, the cleaning, any improvement to the appearance of these things is the positive side of Juno Chiron. So when we talk about health, having an impact on people's appearance in terms of Juno Chiron, here we see some of the illustrations for that. Oh, I forget what this kid's name was. This was the kid in the Cher movie. Rocky was his first name, where he had a disease that he just, affected his physical appearance. And Toulouse-Lautrec had Juno Chiron. Allen Ginsberg had Juno Chiron. Princess Caroline of Monaco had Juno Chiron. And Stacy Keach also with the facial deformity. Now, so that's one way it works is with people's health. But also when people wear anything to cover injuries or to help their injuries, like an artificial leg. Now, Duckworth has Juno Chiron. She was born with the symbolism. It was really more triggered by Neptune when she had her injury and she was fitted for her prosthetic. But on the day it happened, and you will see this all the time, on a day where she had a big Juno, that Juno Chiron was an aspect in the sky. And that's what was going on. There was a Juno Chiron aspect in the sky, but Neptune was really hitting her natal Juno Chiron symbolism. And here's a picture of Venus Williams when she had progressed Chiron square her natal Juno. She broke her foot and had to wear that little booty, and that is a Juno Chiron entity, that little booty. Now, Tycho Brahe, his nose was cut off in a duel. He had to be fixed for a prosthetic nose. On the day his nose was cut off, it was not about the duel was not about a relationship. Transiting Chiron was conjunct natal Juno. He had his nose replaced with a prosthetic. He had no natal aspect. You see this all the time, where people don't have the natal aspect, they get a transit, the transit will manifest. So this guy's famous quote, these guys were, what do we want to say about these people? These people's looks were distinctive, but they owned it. So this guy said, paint my picture, warts and all. That's a very famous quote. This guy went white when he was a teenager, Jim Jarmusch, and never did a thing about it. His hair went white. He let it go white. He was a teenage boy with white hair, and that was that. I call them premature silver foxes, and they owned it. Same with Barbara Bush, never colored her hair. Same with Charlie Watts, never colored his hair. There you have it. So these people were born on the same week in January 1956. There was a Juno Chiron declination. She had the breasts. In fact, she said before she had her reduction that people never looked her in the eye. She had the height. He had the teeth. And that's what made them all distinctive from other people. Now, when John F. Kennedy Jr. who did not have the natal picture, had the opposition. Now, I'm not saying this is what made him be sexiest man alive. I'm just saying that when he got the distinction, it didn't matter whether he was the sexiest man alive or the guy who lost his nose. It's something that distinguished, it was something physical about his appearance. It distinguished him from other people. In the case of Bry, it was an injury. In JFK Jr.'s case, it was a magazine cover that distinguished him. So he was set apart by his good looks. And that's an eye-opener about Chiron, that you can be set apart and different from people with something as wonderful as being the handsomest or the sexiest. This was actually the first time I ever got Juno Chiron a few years ago, when I was just looking at people with Juno Chiron and their progressions, what happened. And this guy, Aaron Copland, the composer, he composed an opera, actually, a ballet, Rodeo. Progressed Chiron was squaring his natal Juno precisely when it premiered. And the subject, the content of it, was a lonely cowgirl, likes a guy. He likes the more feminine girl, and she's the outcast. And so you see this all the time with art, where the content of the art is represented like a completely real, true life thing in the horoscope of the artist. So here we have artists also who we see specialized in misshapen people. This is a guy named Andre Gill, who you can see it. It's a cartoon of a misshapen Dickens. And Giacometti, also misshapen people. Mary Shelley and Frankenstein the Outcast. Hans Christian Andersen, he wrote stories about outcasts, but he himself had the problem, never really connected with a relationship, tried, but never happened. And here we have Ruskin, Juno Chiron, who loved grotesques. And Chiron was a grotesque. So that's art, Juno Chiron and the arts. Let's look at some other artists with Juno Chiron. Gaudi, if anybody has ever been to or planned to go to Spain, you've got to, you've seen the Gaudi stuff or you have to see it. He used recycled materials. And so here you can see that he used, well, you can't really see it, but he used broken plates and cups. This is astonishing that he made this Sagrada Familia. It looks like a fabulous cathedral. It's made with broken bottles and bottle caps. You get up to these spires and you can see that this is made out of broken bottles and bottle caps. The way he died was extraordinary. He didn't care about it was also a Juno Chiron story. He did not care about his appearance. He dressed in shabby clothes. He was hit by a bus, taken to the hospital, and he was ignored because they thought he was a beggar. He was wearing shabby clothes. And they didn't discover until after he died that he was the famous Gaudi. Derek Jarman, he made art from wreckage. Who wouldn't want that? Now, let's talk about the damage of clothes. So I have a Juno Chiron story where Chiron was stationing trine my natal Juno. Station, trine. And I was speaking at an event and they came up and pinned a little badge to me. I was wearing my best blouse and it had a big safety pin and they went right through my best blouse with that big safety pin. And that's what happened with a Chiron trine Juno. And in all honesty, we can talk about the sexual transgressions and talk about relationship issues, but when you get a transit of Chiron to Juno or Juno to Chiron, this is actually more likely the level on which it's going to operate, that something beautiful or a piece of adornment is going to be marred, is going to be damaged one way or another. And the restoration ranges from antique dealers to dry cleaners. The guy who founded Amway was a Juno Chiron guy. So anything that restores or repairs something in disrepair is a Juno Chiron activity. So where are we? So I don't know why I brought this up other than she is so gorgeous and she has Juno Chiron and she's got alopecia. So there you go with gorgeous people and Juno Chiron. But this is a super interesting story. She was involved in a trial of Charles Taylor. He was a war criminal in Africa. And he gave her, it was alleged that he gave her a bunch of blood diamonds. And when she testified about those blood diamonds, transiting Juno was hitting her natal Juno Chiron. And so we're talking about decorative items that have to do with harm, So that's the end of this particular video. If you want to get in touch with me, here's my email. But I've got a blog. All of this is in the blog. It's Midpoint Observatory. And if you're interested in midpoints, I hope we see you there. Bye.